Hey, good morning. Good morning. It's Erin from Girl Catch Fire. Happy St. Patrick's Day for those of us who celebrate. Looks like I got sound this morning, so I'm happy about that. Hey, if you're here, go ahead and drop who you are and where you are in the chat because that's really helpful to me to kind of see who's watching and where. So, by the way, in case you're new around here, as I said, I'm Erin and I'm from Girl Catch Fire, and we help women get unstuck and on purpose at midlife. But really, we kind of help people get unstuck and on purpose in general. So today, I want to talk about control. How many of you are control freaks? You have a little problem with control? We're going to talk about today. I titled this one like what we can and cannot control, because something I find is that when we are trying to control things we cannot control because we are not aware that we're trying to control them, we create all kinds of suffering for ourselves and for the people around us. And so I'm going to give you a tool today to help you delineate what you can control, what you cannot control, and maybe what you can influence. It's really helpful to have things in those different categories. So it's a straight up tool I teach my clients all the time, and I think it might help you. So you might have a piece of paper out. And what I'd love for you to do is to make 3 concentric circles on this piece of paper. So that, in case you don't know what concentric means, that's one little circle in the middle, another circle around it, and then a third circle around both of those. Okay. And we're going to put a couple things in these circles to help us figure out what it is we can control, what we can influence, and what we can't control. Okay. So working from the outside in on these circles, I want you to think about the first outer band being what we call the circle of concern. And this can be all kinds of things. I mean, you name it. There are plenty of things to be concerned about right now. Like, are my retirement accounts going to continue to drop with the stock market? I'm worried about, that we don't recycle in my town anymore. I'm worried about polar bears. I'm worried about the climate change. All of these big things. I'm worried about fascism and rising authoritarianism. Okay. That's all stuff that would be in your circle of concern, which is basically a wide range of concerns over things we really don't have much control over, if any. I don't have any control over the stock market. I like to think I do, but I do not. And probably you don't either. So I just got to recognize that, like, okay, I don't have any control over this, right? So that's your circle of concern. You can be concerned about it, but recognize you're not going to control it. Okay. The inner circle, not the inmost, but the next one in, the second band, is your circle of influence. And this is interesting. This is a little different than how I used to teach this. But these are concerns that you have that you can actually do something about. You may not be able to control the outcome, but you can influence it, right? So you definitely can't control your kids, or you can't control your spouse, but you have a lot of influence with them, okay? And once you know the difference between influence and control, your life will get better because you can influence people a lot of ways, but ultimately you can't control anybody. And that some of you need to grab hold of that today, like to really think for a second, like, who am I trying to control and why? Okay. So influence is one thing, control is another. So that second band is like, what can I influence among the things I'm concerned about and how? It's a great question to ask. And I'm going to have you go through these in a second. And then the third one is the circle of control. The inmost circle is the circle of control. And the circle of control is like what you actually can control in your life, which, believe it or not, is at once the most important stuff and the stuff that feels kind of opaque. So here's what I mean. The things you actually can control are your words, your thoughts, and your actions. And for some of you, that's bad news because you're still trying to control the people around you or trying to influence them. You're calling it influence, but you're trying to control them. But the truth is you can really only control yourself. You can really only control your mouth, your mind, and your actions. So we're going to talk about that. So just for a second, I'm going to give you a little help with this for a minute. I want you to jot down a couple things on that outer band, things that you're concerned about, just 2 or 3 things like that you really don't have any control over. Go ahead and jot those down just as a way of practicing this. And then in that second circle, I want you to write down a couple of things you can influence. So in my example, like, okay, I can't control the stock market, but I can influence what I'm doing in it by opening my, Fidelity account and having a look and maybe making some choices. Okay, it's something I can influence. And then circle control. Well, I can control my mouth, I can control my mind, and I can control my actions. So, what are those for you? What are those three things? How do they break down? We're going to talk about the third one, the innermost circle, your mind, your mouth, and your actions, your circle of actual control, things you can control. All right, ready? So, something else that I love to teach is called the success cycle. And it really has to do, it starts in your mind. Okay, so that's the first aspect we're going to tackle today. How's your mind? Right? Like, what's going on between your ears all day, every day? And the reason this matters is because you have a thought, and it can be informed by your emotions. That's a topic for another day. But let's just say you have a thought and you think it all the time and you repeatedly think it. You've got it on a loop and you think it and think it and think it. Like, let's just say, oh, there's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? As a thought, you think that enough times and that's going to become a belief system for you. Okay. And then your belief systems impact how you act and how you show up in the world. Okay. And then those actions impact your outcomes. And then your outcomes can oftentimes confirm what the original thought was. All right. So that's why we call it a cycle. Well, I teach this all the time to my clients because you think your thoughts are harmless and they are not. Your thoughts become things. Let me give you the example I love to use. Let's just say you're a single person and a single gal and you want to meet somebody. And but you have a thought in your head that all men are sleazy or jerks or unreliable or whatever. You just got a whole bunch of thoughts about men just not being great. And so you think that over and over and over again. Yeah, men are shady, men are shady, men are shady, like whatever. And then you go on a date. Like, how are you going to act on that date? Well, you're going to act as if the person sitting across from you is shady, whether they actually are or not. And then the outcome you're going to get, either if it's not a shady guy and he's a good guy, he's going to run. Or if he is a shady guy, he's going to work really hard to convince you he's not shady or something else. And so it's going to confirm for you what you already believe. This is also called confirmation bias. It's a good thing to know. So around here, we just call it the success cycle. So that's why in the circle of control, the first thing that we want to control is our minds. Like, what are you actually thinking? What thoughts are running through your head all the time that are becoming belief systems for you? And then how are those belief systems impacting your behavior and how are they impacting your outcomes? All right? So let's think about what we're thinking about. What's that thought that you keep playing over and over in your head and is just strategically, you might ask yourself, well, wait a second, like how true is this? Well, that all men are shady? Of course that's not true. It feels true, but it's not true. And you know that's not true. Okay. And so when you begin to challenge your own thinking, then you can start to adjust your belief systems and then change the rest of the cycle accordingly. All right. And that's an inside job. And it's hard work, and most people don't want to do it. They'd rather just look outward and blame everybody else for everything that's going on. And it's like, no, because you can do that, but you can't really influence strangers. You can't control anybody around you, and you certainly can't control the world, the way the world's behaving. What you can control is your own mind. Like, so get this under control, right? So that's the first thing. What about your mouth? Oh boy. All right. So the second part of this is like, the one thing I can control besides my mind is I can control my mouth. Oh boy, how many of you guys need to control your mouth a little bit? Right? Either gossiping, just being negative, like, discouraging people, whatever. What's going on with your mouth? Just like your mind, you got to see what is coming out of your mouth. Why? Because Proverbs says the power of life and death is in the tongue. So what are you speaking? Are you speaking life or are you speaking death? And, to put a finer point on it, we could just go straight to Jesus. Yikes. He says, he says this, like, for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good man out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil man out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. Get this part, guys. Oh my gosh. I tell you, on the day of judgment, men will render account for every careless word they utter. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Yikes. All right. Again, you might not be a Jesus follower, and that's fine, but that's some wisdom right there, regardless of what you believe. Like, people are, a tree is known by its fruit. And the way people test your fruit is by listening to you talk and seeing how you behave out in the world, right? So we'll talk about action in just a second, but if you're controlling your mind and challenging your own thinking and really taking control of what's going on between your ears, that will be reflected in what comes out of your mouth. Like, and you may actually become an encouragement to people rather than gossiping about them. Or you may become more powerful in what you say than just complaining all the time. How many of you have a complaining habit? Oh, for heaven's sake, you can control that, you know? You don't have to walk around complaining. I know that's a bit of a butt spank for some of you. It's a butt spank for me. And okay, so what do you want to do about it, right? In times of like big uncertainty like we've got right now, what do you want to do? And I would suggest that we take this stuff seriously. That all you can really control is you. And the work you're doing is an inside job. You're working on your mind, you're working on your mouth. The third thing is you're going to work on your action. Your action. Now, remember, if you're thinking about the success cycle, if you're changing your thoughts, it's going to change your belief system, which is going to change your behavior, which is going to change your outcomes, right? So the action that you're going to be taking, if you're already working on your mind and your mouth, is going to be better. You're going to be putting out better fruit that people actually want to pick and eat. Okay. I was reading this morning on Mel Robbins sent her newsletter or whatever, and she was talking about being on a plane. And the woman next to her was just giving the flight attendant the business and just being whatever. And we see this so much now, just people just losing it. And that's a choice. That's a choice, right? Just behaving badly in public. It's such a bad look. And again, but it is an action that's often informed out of mind and mouth. So, and interestingly, Mel said she chose not to react to it and just to be like extra kind and supportive to the flight attendant. And that's one way to approach that, certainly. But I would invite all of us to think like, okay, again, what fruit are you bearing out in the world? Is it courteous? Man, can we bring courtesy back? Like, on the internet, I think you can forget about it. But like in real life, courtesy would be, I think, the fruit of a renewed mind and a renewed mouth. And again, when we're talking about things we can control, we want to control other people and we want to control other people's behavior. But the truth is, it's an inside job. And that's what I want us to grab onto today is that, like, you know what? Maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out in the world and control myself because I can. And I'm going to start before I even leave my house working on my mind. And then I'm going to tighten up what's coming out of my mouth. And then I'm going to think about my action. What if the action that you chose to take out in the world was simply a reflection of the fact that you are focused on bearing good fruit? Would you be more courteous? Would you be more generous? Would you be more helpful and service oriented? Even if that means that you're going to resist some things that are going on, can you still show up in a way to your life that indicates that you are bearing good fruit, even if you are resisting in some way or even protesting in some way? Again, I'm not really sure what you're up to, but what I'm advising us all here is simply to say, all right, there are things that I can control and there are things that I cannot. And if I am focused on the things that I cannot control and just raging and spewing about it, I'm not sure that that's changing my environment. I'm not sure that I'm bearing the fruit that I want to bear. And so, as an invitation, I'd like you just to consider today, like, how do I bear good fruit? How do I be responsible for the stuff that's coming out of my mouth? You know, even things that I disagree with, even people I disagree with, can I do that in a way that is still courteous and respectful? Because that would be good fruit. And I can control that. And by the way, you know, guys, I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to anybody here, but I just want to remind us that if you are spending a lot of time in that outer band of things that you cannot actually control, and then going out in the world and unleashing on people on strangers around you or in the environment around you. Remember, we're energetic beings. And so if you're putting off a lot of either verbally or just energetically, a lot of this frustration or anger or fear or whatever, it's just making it worse. All right. So think about what you can control. Um, think about what you can influence and maybe adjust the levers there and then let it go. Right. But the things you can control, it's always an inside job. So, with that said, maybe this week go look for ways to bear good fruit and to love and encourage each other no matter what you're doing. No matter what you're doing. All right. I hope this helps you. And I hope you have a beautiful week. And I'll see y'all soon.